The Barnes & Noble effect. When the big Barnes & Noble chain stores began opening across the U.S., offering all kinds of books on all kinds of subjects by all kinds of writers, publishers began to notice something strange. More and more people were buying books from fewer and fewer authors. Now, how could that be? Well, Agatha Christie, Harold Robbins, Danielle Steele, Sidney Sheldon, Stephen King, sales of known authors went through the ceiling. And the sale of what are known as mid-list authors in the publishing business, good writers that just aren't all that well known or newer people, those sales fell through the floor. Now, here's what was happening. Confronted with a huge, glitzy building full of books, people walked in, looked around, got overwhelmed by it all, and chose authors they were already familiar with. The average customer at Barnes & Noble became a refugee from complexity and fled to the familiar. Now, fast forward to today. Through technology, Amazon Books offers you other books by the same author or on the same subjects, things you've never heard of and never knew you wanted. So, you buy them. Or at least book addicts like I do buy them. Amazon solved the problem of complexity through an algorithm that Mr. Turing thought of. The title of my talk today is from a fantastic new book that I got on Amazon, didn't know I needed it, by the historian of ideas, Felipe Fernandez-Armesto, Out of Our Minds, What We Think and How We Came to Think It. The quote's in the order of service. Confused by chaos, infantilized by ignorance, refugees from complexity flee to fanaticism and dogmatism. I think Dr. Fernandez-Armesto explains a lot about book sales, yes, and about the politics of our world today. But back for a moment to marketing. Last spring, I mentioned a marketing term that I had run into. It's an acronym, LOHAS, L-O-H-A-S, which stands for Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability. Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability, LOHAS. LOHAS are a marketing segment of people who are interested in living healthy lives of personal development as they protect the environment, work for social justice, and live sustainably. Does that describe people you know? Chances are it does. LOHAS are the secular people, the secular humanists, the congregational humanists, the spiritual but not religious, and the liberal religious people of the United States. LOHAS are the liberal base of the Democratic Party. LOHAS make up only 27% of the U.S. population, 27%, but LOHAS are a $500 billion market share in the U.S. If you go to most of our local stores, you'll see how heavily LOHAS are marketed to. Lifestyles of health and sustainability. Why wouldn't everyone want to do that? Why are LOHAS only 27% of the population? Personal development? Roughly 25% of Americans don't even read one book in a year, even the good old Bible. Protecting the environment? According to Pew Research, the number of Americans who believe in climate change is growing, but 64% of Americans still believe that Jesus Christ will come back to earth before 2050. 64%. Why live sustainably when we're all going to cash out and head for heaven in 30 years? Why work for justice in our society when it's all going to be over soon? 64%. So remember, Lohas are a minority. You might think that the belief that Jesus will come back any day now and fix things would lead to hope, but it appears rather to stoke fear. Again, those words of Felipe Fernandez-Armesto, confused by chaos, infantilized by ignorance, refugees from complexity flee to fanaticism and dogmatism. I think that's a pithy description of the rise in populist authoritarian nationalism, which is a worldwide phenomenon. We're seeing the rise of fanatical and dogmatic forms of Hindu nationalism. In Hungary, there is a fanatical and dogmatic police state. So is Poland. Across the globe, we see the rise of fanatical and dogmatic far-right parties, the Danish People's Party, Alternative for Germany, Golden Dawn in Greece, the League in Italy, Front National in France, the Party for Freedom in the Netherlands, and the Social Liberal Party in Brazil that's burning down the Amazon. The list goes on and on. Now, here's something I want you to ponder. The Yalta Conference of the Allies at the end of the Second World War featured what were then known as the Big Three: Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and Franklin Roosevelt. And you've all seen the picture of the three old guys sitting down there together, about to win the war, and Roosevelt just a few days from his death. Think about how very, very different those three guys saw government, social order, economics. Quite a difference. They were only allies out of absolute necessity. Now think about today. The big three are Vladimir Putin, Boris Johnson, and Donald Trump. How different are their views of government and economics and social order? The right-wing populist movements across the globe are fanatical and dogmatic and based in fear. Islamophobia, white replacement theory, and perhaps biggest, anti-immigrant sentiment, fear of the other. These tactics violate every tenet of humanism. In marketing terms, of course we know that fear sells. It's visceral, it's automatic, it causes people to act. It's easy to sell the simple black and white thinking that grounds all of the populist right movements across our globe today. It's easy to point to the picture of some kind of a rosy past that actually never existed. Across our globe, refugees from complexity are rushing to extremist leaders who offer extremist policies. And nowhere is the effects of this refugeeing from complexity more dire than in the case of actual and real refugees in our world today. And so, today I hope to look at some of these issues in a slightly more complex way. You know, everybody's always trundling out the Nazis, of course. It's a big example always, and especially now. I just read this cliche the other day in a magazine. I want to read it to you verbatim. Quote, "Saddled with a humiliating surrender treaty after World War I, struggling with horrendous economy and fears of surging crime, and feeling a profound sense of disrespect and marginalization in world affairs, the German people were ripe for the picking of a demagogic loudmouth promising national redemption and glory." End quote. Now, that's the cliche. That's a black and white way of refugeeing from the Nazi complexity. But it's misleading, I think, and dangerous to buy that version of events. Here's a fact that doesn't get discussed much. In 1933, when the Nazi Party came to power in Germany, the party had only 2 million official members, 2 million official members, and only 33% approval rating among the voters. The party had 2 million official members out of a registered voting population of 45 million. 2 million, 45 million. You can't talk about the German people. By 1939, after many Germans saw which way the wind was blowing, that the number of registered Nazis had risen to 5.3 million. 5.3. The Nazi Party topped out in 1940, just short of 6 million members out of a registered voting population of 45 million. Now remember, the German government was just about to order events that led to the death of 11 million German men, women, and children. 11 million. The more complex lesson: Nazism is a niche market. But, of course, it doesn't take a majority. It takes a fanatical and dogmatic hooligan and a lot of refugeeing from complexity for that to occur, or a minority of complex thinkers, perhaps, could do the same thing. By the way, another fact you don't hear: at its zenith, the Nazi Party was 81% male and 19% female. 81%, 19%. Niche market. Nazism is a guy thing. And I suspect authoritarianism in general is a guy thing, which is probably another good reason that patriarchy needs to go. Now let's stick with Germany for a few more moments. I want to add a little more complexity. Today, Germany has a bit over 80 million people. If immigration levels remain the same as today, by 2060, the year 2060, the German population will be down by 13 million people. Down by 13 million people. If Jesus doesn't come back, German society will be in very big trouble by 2060, in the lifetimes of people alive today. Here's something also complex. Here in the United States, Pew Research indicates that 88% of the U.S. population's growth over the next 50 years, 88% in the next 50 years, will be from immigrants and their children and their grandchildren. By 2045, all net population growth in the United States will be due to immigrants and the children and grandchildren of immigrants, those who are here today and those who hope to come. If they don't come, the U.S., like Germany, will be in big demographic hot water. Minnesota is in even worse shape than the U.S. average demographically. We now have 5.6 million people in our state, 5.6 million. The population of Minnesota, given the current trends of birth and immigration, will grow until 2025. We're starting the program year 2019-2020. By 2025, it will stop growing and will begin and what's probably going to be an inexorable decline in population. Now, Minnesota currently has the highest per capita rate of immigration in the nation. Good on Minnesota. If Jesus doesn't come back by 2050, immigration is our only hope. My advice is to hug an immigrant today. Ask for permission first, but that immigrant or that immigrant's children may be your only hope. Don't buy into the simple-minded black and white scaremongering. Look at the numbers. Now, some of you know my wife, Teresa, over here, works in adult basic education. It's a program, a state program, attempting to educate adults who, for whatever reason, have become adult without having adequate education and job skills. Now, most of the people who walk through her door are immigrants. In this state today, we have professional training programs with nobody in them. That means when old boomers like me fall over dead, there aren't any replacements coming up. There's no one there to push the buttons or to read the test results or to take the phone call. Now, cities are better insulated from this disaster than our rural areas, who need to be really worried. Outstate Minnesotans should be out on the streets demanding streamlined immigration policies and more immigrants now. Many of our leaders are doing us a great disservice. They're making our citizens, as the quote in the order of service goes, they're making them confused by chaos, infantilized by ignorance, refugees from complexity, fleeing to fanaticism and dogmatism. As I've said often from this podium, we humanists are called to be the adults in the room and look at the real numbers. But here's something we know. If you look at it from a marketing standpoint, complexity is hard to sell. The human animal prefers simple, clear, and prepackaged. Faced with a huge building full of books, our natural reaction is to run for what we recognize. If we hope to get past the instinct to run away, we have to think about embracing complexity and chaos. For our own good and for the long-term good of the planet, we don't want a leader who simplifies the immigration question so that everyone can understand it. We don't want the subject dumbed down into black and white, good and evil, good guys and bad guys. Don't give us black and white, good and bad. Tell us that it's a complex issue and trust citizens to be not confused by chaos. We understand that some things are complex, even chaotic. We must insist upon being not infantilized by ignorance. No one can know everything, of course. We don't have to have an opinion on everything either. I know there are subjects I don't understand enough to even have an opinion on, and that's okay. Human cultures and societies are built on the simple idea that a bunch of people can know a bunch of different things and all help each other out. That's called civilization. We humanists are called to avoid being refugees from complexity. We're called to say no to invitations to give up the complexity of the democratic process in order to flee into the false safety of fanaticism and dogmatism. From all indications I can see, Jesus isn't coming back anytime soon. George Washington isn't coming back. Eleanor Roosevelt isn't coming back. We are on our own. That's the central claim and the central insight and the central hope of humanist thought. We're on our own, but it's okay because we are enough to solve the problems. We just have to settle down and put on our thinking caps. You know, you remember your thinking cap from first grade, right? You know, you give it a little shake there, and then you put it on and tie it, right? Putting on your thinking cap is a whole lot better as a gesture next time you're somewhere than giving some kind of weird fascist salute. Believe me. Yes, marketers have all of our numbers, there's no doubt about that, but that doesn't mean that we can't insist on being human and trusting in humanity. Living healthy lives of personal development as we protect the environment, work for social justice, and live sustainably ain't a bad way to live, actually. You know, aloha's go. Sure, chaos is confusing. Facts and truth are difficult to sift out of all the data we encounter minute by minute by minute, but we don't have to run away into dogmatism and fanaticism. We can stop and we can stare down the complexity. Humanism calls us to embrace the chaos and the complexity of the world. Sure, there are complications. Welcome to reality.